Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And Lorenzo.
And welcome to our Best of Saturday series. Now that we have hundreds of episodes, we get a lot of listeners asking us where to start.
So we'll be selecting some of our most popular episodes to share each Saturday from our years of podcasting. We hope you enjoy it.
No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, today I would like to talk about the difference between coincidence of objective and coincidence of purpose.
Okay.
And the first time I heard those terms, it was more than a decade ago, and I didn't know what they were. Like, I didn't know what the person was talking about when they said them to me. And it took a few years for me to interact with enough people to start seeing the difference between the two, because they can seem the same, but I think they are vastly different when it comes to the topic of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll give a little high level in a nutshell of what the differences are. And then I kind of want to get your thoughts on how this impacts leadership in your life.
Okay.
So if you have a coincidence of objective with someone, it means the outcome you're looking for is the same. You share the same goal. When you have a coincidence of purpose with someone, it means you share the same values that are supposed to get you to that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I think they are different is that the objective can change, the purpose typically doesn't. And so if you have a sense of purpose around something, everybody has a sense of purpose around something. And if you are aligning your objectives with that purpose, then regardless of the objectives changing, your purpose is still the same. But if you are aligning with your people around different objectives, but your purpose does not align with them, then when the objective changes, your people that report to you can start to think, wait a minute, this person's values are changing, this person's leadership style is changing. It can kind of throw them for a loop. So, I mean, does that make sense? And have you seen this happen in your life? Have you had leaders where you thought you had a coincidence of purpose with them, and it turned out you only had a coincidence of objective?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens, quite a bit, especially when you're in, businesses or industries where there's a very high expectation around performance.
Sure.
It kind of muddies the waters quite a bit. And it's the same reason why, people that work in the commission sales industry kind of have a bad rap initially, right? Because the initial thought is that, it's about making money, and that's the driving element of the relationship, when sometimes for some leaders in that industry, it's not. It is really about a good culture, work environment, and development. So I think that absolutely I've seen it. I've dealt with it personally, as an employee and as a leader. Many times where I see it start to actually kind of define itself, and I think if you ask the majority of people to think through this concept and when it's happened to them, it's when, you are a part of a team or an organization or a business where things are going really, really well. And, there's a lot of positive accolades. There's a lot of, it's about the team. It's about, us, look at all these great things.
Right.
Then you hit a little bit of a hurdle or a roadblock,
Performance-wise?
Exactly, performance-wise. Yep. Industry goes down, results drop, something's happened. Even sometimes a leader, gets changed out somewhere in the mix. And we've talked about that before from a chameleon leadership standpoint. But something happens where now all of a sudden the leader that you're working for, or that's a peer of yours, shows up in a completely different way. And then you quickly realize that it was never about the alignment of the values and the purpose. It was about the objective. It was about the fact that they were this person in this way and this supportive because the objective they wanted to achieve, you were a part of getting that. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a collaborative effort and the values were not aligned.
The first thing you brought up was about commission sales. And I think that's a great example because it's something that I think that all of our listeners could be able to relate to in terms of what they've experienced as customers of things. And so if you go in to an environment where you think the person you're speaking to is trying to get you the best solution for your life, they're trying to solve your problem with you, that would be a coincidence of purpose. You both have this desire to solve your problem as the customer. But then if you realized that what the salesperson's desire was not to solve your problem, but their desire was to put this amount of money in their pocket, and that amount changed depending on what they sold you, you would immediately realize that, oh, wait a minute, we do not have a coincidence of purpose here. We have a coincidence of objective. So the objective is to solve my problem, but not because the salesperson wants it solved, but because the salesperson wants to put money in their pocket. And so when an organization goes away from commission sales, in its roots, that is the goal. The goal is to eliminate the divide between the coincidence of objective and the coincidence of purpose, so that it's the hopes that their salespeople can start to align with the customer on a purpose-driven level, as opposed to just trying to put money in their pocket. And what they're hoping for is that, okay, maybe the solution becomes better because the customer actually feels taken care of, because there isn't this kind of ulterior motive of, oh, I can't recommend this, which would be the perfect product because I don't make any money on it. Instead, I'll go with this route, which still solves the problem, maybe not as well, but it puts a lot more money in my pocket. And so I think commission sales environment is a great example of that, and why people have their guard up naturally when they walk into a car dealership. You see a lot of car dealerships out there that are moving away from it, and they're putting it as part of their advertising. No haggle pricing. We're not here to try to milk you. The price is the price, and it's their way of basically saying, I don't have an objective here to make more money on the car. The price is what it is, and I'm just here to answer questions. And so I think, like I said, I think our listeners can relate to this in their personal lives, but I want to make sure that you understand that your leader, or if you are a leader of people, this is a relationship you have to consider every day. Do you have a coincidence of purpose with the person that leads you? And do you have a coincidence of purpose with the people who you lead? Mm-hmm. Or do you just have a coincidence of objective? And whether or not you can, make sure your people understand where the alignment is I think is the first step to gaining followership from them.
Yeah, and I think too, the interesting thing, as you were talking through that scenario and just kind of how that, the car industry specifically is taking a little bit of a turn. I immediately think though that at the end of the day, it's truly about leadership, because at the same time that industries and organizations may be trying to shake that perception, as a result of the fact that decades and decades of time, from a cultural standpoint, have really tagged specific industries with that feeling. I am well aware, though, of places that are fully commissioned, that's how people make their money. But as a result of really great leadership, and as a result of leaders making sure that people are aligned from a value standpoint and from a purpose standpoint, that behavior and that culture and that environment doesn't exist in those places. But I think that it's because, like with anything, and I think as a leader, as a new leader with a team, we've talked about like being transparent, being upfront, putting out what your vision is, defining not only what you expect from your team, but from what your team should expect from you, holding yourself accountable. Like, these are all those things that you do as a leader that help to align people on the purpose and help to explain what your purpose is, because that in itself is saying, like, here's what I stand for, here's what I believe, here's what I'm looking to achieve. Hold me accountable to it as your leader. And if I don't do those things, then that I'm more about the objective than about the purpose. So it's that piece of putting yourself out there first to say, like, look at me, observe me, judge me on my behaviors, because that's what I'm going to ask of you as my team. But it's just one of those things that it's really, really interesting that regardless of industry or, the fact that people feel from an objective standpoint, it's a commission place, not commission, whatever the case is, that it really boils down to how does effective leadership and how do effective leaders influence that culture and shake any of those, it's more about the objective than the purpose situations, simply by being really good leaders.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic example, because I think what it makes me think of is that
the where breakdowns in this area occur are not just because you happen to have a coincidence of objective and not purpose with your leader, or if you're the leader of people. It's when the perception is one thing and the reality is another. And so if you go in knowing that all you have with a person is a coincidence of objective, you act differently and you position yourself differently than if you believe you have a coincidence of purpose with them. And if you go into that situation knowing what all the cards are, and you act a certain way, you're never going to feel duped. You're never going to feel like, oh, this person, I thought they were in this for me or to help me out, but really they were in it to help them out. You never get that feeling, and therefore you never feel like there is a deficit of leadership there. When you go into it thinking one thing and it ends up being the other, that's when it causes rifts in the relationship. So to give a perfect example that I've experienced in my own career, I've had leaders who have really reached out to try to help me get better at things in the job that I was doing. And the way that it was positioned was from the standpoint of, I want to see you succeed here. I want to see you get better at this. I want to see you, get better at the things that will help you succeed at this job. And I took it as like, wow, this person is really invested in my success. And then something would change on their scorecard or what they were being asked from their boss. And then the conversations would turn to stop focusing on this and instead focus on this. And I'd be thinking, well, wait a minute. I'm already good at that. Like, I don't need to work on that part. Why can't we do what we talked about last time? The things that I need to get better at, the things I need to work on. And I realized very quickly that, the first conversation was not about making sure I was a better employee. The first conversation was making sure that I was helping that leader accomplish their objectives so that their boss wouldn't come down on them. Mm-hmm. And that's a very sobering feeling as an employee to think, it's like you put yourself out there and you feel vulnerable and you want to talk about how you want to improve and you want to get better at something. And you realize that it was going in one ear and out the other, because all they were thinking is, how can I get this person to do something for me so that I look better to my boss? And you almost feel manipulated. I know I have felt manipulated when that's happened. And so when I lead people, I try not to do that. I try to make sure that if there is not because sometimes we're talking about work here, sometimes there is an objective that you have to accomplish. But as a leader, I really try not to sell it as that I have a coincidence of purpose with a person. That I try to, I'm not aligning this with like a deeper set of values of I want to try to help this person improve. If it's truly an objective that is performance-based that we need to get better at for those reasons, I need to sell it as that. I need to say this is why we are having this conversation right now, not because of some deeper desire to get you better. We'll have those conversations too, but that's not what this is about.
Yeah. Well, and I think, even as you were kind of walking through this example, here's something that I was guilty of for a very long time. And on the surface, it sounds really, really good. But when you start to dissect it and understand what it means, it's something that you have to be very conscious of. And that is the quotes that I've said of, by saying, I measure success by getting my people promoted. Right. So there's this idea, right, of like, so because I asked the question in the interviews, I talked to people about it, and there's this temptation and this thing that it's like, it's all about getting my people promoted. Well, the reality is, right, so if that is your objective as a leader, then what's happening is that you are making decisions and you are putting people into roles simply to fulfill your objective of saying that this is how I value my leadership and this is how I want people to see me, versus the purpose, which is I actually want people to be successful in the roles that they get. And those are two completely different things.
Absolutely.
As you boil them down. So again, it's very tempting to say. I hear it a lot. I've said it over my years and tenure because, man, it just sounds great. But when you start to peel back the layers on it, what you realize is that if I am just trying to shuffle people into new jobs and new promotions so that they feel loyal to me or so that I feel good about myself or so I can go on the board and write, I've had X amount of promotions into this job in my tenure and this thing, what happens is they get into these roles and they feel good in the short term. And then not all the time, but some of the time, They are vastly underprepared, and they're underdeveloped to actually be successful in that role. And what you have done then is opened up risk to them in their career of things that could either be stoppers or stallers. And it's because the coincidence was about the objective and not about the purpose. Instead of saying, of course I want my people to have opportunity. Of course I feel great when people get promoted and they get these roles. I said, but you know what matters more to me is that when you get those opportunities, that you will be wildly successful in them. You'll be prepared for them. You will learn these lessons in your current role now. You won't make mistakes that I've made in my career, I've seen other people make, because I want you to be prepared for that opportunity. And as a leader, that can be difficult because we all know that sometimes it is the fact that people don't have the perspective yet, the understanding yet, they can't see themselves yet in the way that you see them as a leader assessing talent. And so it can be difficult to tell somebody, yeah, you are absolutely fantastic. You're doing great work. You're just not ready for this role yet. And it's the things that seem small to you, and or that you actually haven't made that mistake yet. And it's kind of like, it's one of those things of like, I need you to make this mistake. I can't tell you to go make the mistake, but I need you to learn this now in your current role, because that mistake at a different level can lead to a whole bunch of different types of things. So it just made me think about the fact that that's something that I always said and felt great about. But then as I've matured professionally and personally, I've realized that that's actually the wrong thing. Because it while sometimes it can have great success, many times it puts people into roles and they're inadequate to be successful in them.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic example, but I would challenge you and say that it's not necessarily the wrong thing to say, because it's one of those statements that could go either way. That it's one of those statements where you don't know whether it's about the purpose or the objective in just by saying it, and it's up to you as the leader to define which of those things you're actually talking about. And I think this is where a lot of leaders have issues, is that they erroneously attribute the good feeling to the result as opposed to what they did for the employee. And so I've definitely made this mistake in my career, where in the example you gave, I've helped to get somebody promoted and they were successful and they loved their job and they did well. And it made me feel really good as a leader that I helped that happen. But I erroneously attributed that good feeling to getting them promoted, not to watching them succeed and thrive in a job. And so my goal became, I want this to happen again. I want to feel this again. I'm going to get somebody else promoted. And so you go down that path of getting that person promoted and they don't do well on that job and you don't get that good feeling. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought this would feel good to get this person promoted. No, the reason it felt good to me as a leader is because that person and I had a coincidence of purpose. We both wanted to see them thrive in their role. And I mistakenly took that as that I got that feeling out of just simply getting them promoted. And that wasn't the case. So I think a lot of leaders start out with really positive intent when it comes to this, and where they falter is just in their inability to correctly identify what is driving them, and they want to kind of put a label on it. They want to compartmentalize and create lists of, these are the things that drive me. Let's write them down and figure and make it happen. And they want them to be tangible accomplishments. I want to accomplish this. I want to get this person promoted, or these 3 people promoted. It's like, no, that wasn't your purpose. That just happened to be how you drove the feeling you got as a leader of seeing your people thrive and succeed in roles. So like I said, I think a lot of leaders are really good at this. They just they go down the wrong path because they're in an effort to be expedient about it. They identify it incorrectly, and then they start to focus on the wrong thing as opposed to what really drove them to begin with.
Yep, I completely agree. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack.
The 1 minute hack.
Okay, for this episode's 1 minute hack, I want you to get your pen and paper, and I want you to write down a list of objectives that you have to get accomplished. And they could be anything. They could be performance-based, they could be people-based, literally any objective that you have that would help drive your success in your own career. Not your personal sense of growth or good feeling, but your actual success within the organization as defined by the organizational standards. And then I want you to figure out which of those items align with your sense of purpose, your values, and which ones do not. And I don't want you to get rid of the ones that do not, because every organization has objectives that you have to accomplish simply because that is your job to do. But I want to make sure that when you're in conversations with your employees, that you are correctly stating what is behind each of these objectives. Is it because you are driven by purpose around getting this accomplished, or are you driven by the objective of the organization? And if it is something where you're driven by the objective of the organization, that's what you tell the person you're having that conversation with. You say, this is part of our job to do. You don't distance yourself from it or try to say, oh, I would rather not do this, but this is what we have to do as our job. It's no, my job in the organization is to get this done and sell it as that. Because the moment you try to align it with one of your values or a sense of purpose, and you get them to come along for the ride based on that, now you have to make sure that your purpose changes to align with future objectives. And that is a very slippery slope that leads to employees not trusting you. So instead, separate out and compartmentalize things that where you are driven by purpose and things where you're driven by objective, and make sure that your employees understand where you're coming from on each one. It'll make you more successful as a leader because it really fosters that relationship based on trust.
Yeah, I think it's a great woman to hack. And I know you mentioned kind of earlier in that just kind of like selling it as objective, but I think it's really just a matter of like informing that it's objective. Like there's
nothing to sell, right?
Nothing to sell, right? Like literally, because when you have a job and you work for an organization, they pay you to do things, and the vast majority of those things can feel really good, and they can be a part of purpose, and they can help for a larger purpose. But some of those things are objectives. Some of those things are things that we don't like to do, we don't want to do, but necessarily have to get done. And we do them, through, assignment, delegation, whatever the case is. But by being upfront with that, and to your point, which I think is a great point, not trying to code it with purpose, and just simply calling it an objective, will then allow you to truly stay in alignment with your purpose and not have that shift, and then not be called out or questioned on what your actual purpose is.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point.
Cool. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.